All right, buckle up. Because what happened in this television studio that night wasn't just an interview. It was a clash of titans, a battle of values played out in front of millions. A liberal television host, known for her sharp, often ruthless questioning, thought she had her prey cornered. The legendary Clint Eastwood. Her mission? To trip him up with a loaded question about his connection to Donald Trump. Little did she know, she was about to step into a career-ending moment. This was prime time, folks, and America was watching. The host, notorious for her ambush-style interviews, had built her reputation on crafting questions designed to make conservative guests look foolish or defensive. Tonight, she was brimming with confidence. Her team had meticulously prepared for weeks, dissecting every public statement Eastwood had ever made, searching for the perfect angle to attack. She was convinced she could make the iconic actor and director stumble, maybe even disavow his past statements. But before we dive into this unforgettable showdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow I've got another story you won't want to miss, right here on this channel. As the cameras started rolling, there sat Clint Eastwood, utterly unfazed. His weathered face, etched with the stories of a lifetime, held the same quiet intensity that had defined his legendary career. Across from him, the host flashed a polished, camera-ready smile, the kind that thinly veils a hidden agenda. She thought she was about to make headlines. 3, 2, Bushi, Xuan. The floor director signaled. What happened next wouldn't just make headlines. It would shatter the host's credibility and remind America why Clint Eastwood is a man who refuses to be pushed around. The interview began smoothly, almost deceptively so. The host started with a seemingly harmless question, the bait on the hook. "Mr. Eastwood," she began, her voice casual, almost playful. "You've built an incredible legacy, from acting to directing, even stepping into political conversations. Would you say you've just been lucky?" Eastwood wasn't fooled for a second. He'd played this game before. It always started soft, a friendly opener before the real attack came. A slight smirk touched the corner of his mouth. He leaned back in his chair, his voice calm but firm. "Luck," he drawled, his deep voice steady, "is what people say when they don't want to acknowledge hard work. They use it to downplay effort, to act like things just fall into place. But let me tell you something, luck doesn't direct movies. Luck doesn't build careers, and luck, sure as hell, doesn't get you through decades in Hollywood." The host's smile wavered ever so slightly. She hadn't expected him to brush off the question so smoothly. But she wasn't done. "So you're saying everything you've accomplished is purely from hard work?" she pressed, tilting her head slightly, trying to regain the upper hand. "I'm saying," Eastwood replied, his eyes locked onto hers, unwavering, "that hard work and perseverance are what separate those who last from those who fade away. I've seen people come and go in this industry. The ones who make it don't rely on luck. They get up every day and do the work, whether anyone's watching or not." There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the studio, a quiet acknowledgement that Eastwood wasn't going to fall for any easy traps. But then, the host went in for what she thought was the kill shot. "Well, let's talk about the people who have influenced you. One name that comes up often is Donald Trump. You've defended him in the past, even publicly supported him at times. Do you stand by that?" The room tensed. This question wasn't meant to elicit an honest conversation. It was a setup, designed to force Eastwood into either defending Trump and facing immediate backlash, or backpedaling and appearing weak. Eastwood exhaled slowly, as if he'd just been asked something laughably predictable. "You know," he began, his voice carrying a quiet authority that commanded attention, "I've been around a long time. I know when someone's asking a real question, and when someone's trying to trap me. And let's be honest," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "That's what this is." The host's carefully constructed expression faltered for a moment. This wasn't the defensive response she had anticipated. Eastwood continued, his voice unwavering. Donald Trump is a man who speaks his mind. That's rare these days. Do I agree with everything he's ever said? Nope. Do I respect that he's willing to stand up and fight for what he believes in? Absolutely. The host tried to regain control, a nervous edge creeping into her voice. But surely, Mr. Eastwood, you can see why some might find his rhetoric divisive. Eastwood chuckled, a low, rumbling sound, shaking his head slightly. Divisive? No, what's divisive is the way people are told what they can and can't say. The way the media picks who's acceptable and who isn't. You don't want a discussion, he stated, his voice firm. You want a confession. But I don't play that game. A murmur ran through the live audience. Even those who didn't support Trump could recognize that Eastwood had just turned the entire interview on its head. Well, the host said, trying to maintain a semblance of composure, though her smile now looked strained. You certainly have strong convictions. Eastwood smiled, a genuine, almost mischievous smile. That's the thing about me, he said, his eyes twinkling slightly. I always have. And just like that, the segment was over. But for the host, the fallout had only just begun. Clint Eastwood's gaze remained steady, his weathered face unreadable, as he leaned back in his chair. The tension in the studio was palpable, a quiet energy rippling through the live audience as they waited to see how this exchange would unfold. The liberal host, well known for her confrontational style, thought she had set the perfect trap. But she was about to realize she had grossly underestimated the man sitting across from her. The American people, Clint said, his voice as steady and deliberate as a seasoned gunslinger, already know exactly what they need to know about Donald Trump. He's bold, relentless, and he's spent his life taking on the toughest fights, something the media conveniently ignores. Unlike some folks who feel the need to fill every silence with noise, he speaks when it matters. A murmur of approval swept through the audience. The host's polished smile faltered for just a moment, barely perceptible, but enough for those paying close attention to notice. She wasn't used to guests holding their ground so firmly. But instead of backing off, she doubled down, a glint of desperation in her eyes. Let's talk about those so-called accomplishments, she said, her tone shifting from cordial to something sharper, more aggressive. Because there are plenty of people who would argue that his greatest achievement is simply being Donald Trump. The air in the studio seemed to turn cold. The cameramen exchanged subtle glances, sensing that what was about to happen next would be one of the most talked-about moments in television history. Clint's expression remained unchanged, but there was a flicker of something in his eye, something quiet, something dangerous. He leaned forward slightly, his voice as firm as ever. You want to talk about accomplishments, he said, his gaze unwavering. Fine, let's talk facts. Donald Trump didn't just wake up one day with an empire in his lap. He built it. He didn't follow the crowd. He challenged it. He took on the political establishment, the media, and an entire system designed to keep outsiders out. And despite every effort to take him down, he's still standing. That's not just being Donald Trump. That's perseverance. That's strategy. And that's a kind of toughness most people wouldn't last a day in. The host's expression stiffened. This wasn't the direction she had anticipated. Desperate to regain control, she quickly pivoted. Well, Mr. Eastwood, she said, forcing a tight-lipped smile, don't you think that his wealth and status have given him opportunities others don't have? Clint let out a low chuckle, calm, unshaken, but unmistakably unimpressed. You know what's interesting about that question, he mused, a hint of amusement in his voice. It shows exactly what's wrong with how some people think. Opportunity isn't just about what's handed to you, it's about what you do with it. And Donald Trump, he doesn't just walk through doors. He changes the entire room when he enters. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause. The energy in the studio shifted unmistakably. The host's smile tightened, her frustration beginning to show. But surely, she pressed on, her voice carrying a note of urgency, you must admit that his wealth, his name, his influence, all of that impacts how people perceive him. Clint's response was immediate and razor-sharp. You mean how people like you see him? He countered, his eyes piercing. Because let me tell you something about wealth and influence. They don't define a man. They reveal him. And what Donald Trump has revealed through every attack, every challenge, and every attempt to tear him down is why millions of Americans respect him. The host's composure was slipping, but she wasn't done yet. She was about to make her biggest mistake. Well, since you brought up influence, she said, trying to sound casual, but a subtle edge of desperation had crept into her tone. Let's talk about that, Mr. Eastwood. You've built an incredible career. Yet you've chosen to publicly support someone as divisive as Donald Trump. With all the scrutiny he faces, don't you think aligning yourself with him puts you under the same pressure? The constant media attacks, the controversy, doesn't it feel like a golden cage? Clint tilted his head slightly, studying her for a long moment before responding. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute conviction. A golden cage, he repeated, a hint of a smirk forming now. Now that's an interesting phrase. Let me ask you something. Why is it that when a Hollywood actor or a CEO supports a left-wing candidate, they're celebrated as brave and enlightened? But the moment someone like me supports a conservative, suddenly we're trapped in a cage? The audience murmured in agreement, sensing the host's narrative was crumbling. She shifted in her chair, realizing she had walked straight into a trap of her own making. I'm simply suggesting, she tried to recover, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence, that maybe this isn't the life Trump envisioned. Constant scrutiny, endless controversy. Clint's sharp blue eyes locked onto hers. You think Donald Trump didn't know exactly what he was walking into? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. He thrives in this fight. He takes the heat so that everyday Americans don't have to. And instead of recognizing that, the media does everything in its power to tear him down. Why? Because he refuses to play by their rules. The audience erupted into applause once more. The host had no words left, and for the first time that evening, she realized she had lost. Clint Eastwood didn't flinch. He sat there, his weathered hands resting calmly on the armrests of his chair, his piercing gaze fixed on the host. His eyes, sharp as ever despite the years, didn't betray a single flicker of uncertainty. But the air in the studio had changed. The audience, the crew, everyone could feel it. Shadows, his voice steady and deliberate, cut through the silence. No, Donald Trump doesn't stand in anyone's shadow. He doesn't follow, he leads. But that's not something you or your colleagues in the media seem to understand, is it? His expression remained unchanged, unreadable. Your kind of journalism isn't about truth, it's about manufacturing shadows where there aren't any. The tension in the room was thick enough to slice through. The host adjusted herself in her chair, her smile faltering for just a second before she forced it back into place. In her earpiece, her producer was likely whispering furiously, but she had already made her choice. She leaned in, dropping all pretense of subtlety. Mr. Eastwood, she said, her voice tightening, let's cut to the chase. You've built a legendary career. You could align yourself with anyone, yet you continue to stand by Donald Trump, a man whose reputation, let's just say, carries a lot of weight. Don't you ever wonder if it's time to trade up? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the audience, which had been murmuring moments ago, was now frozen. A few audible gasps escaped from the crowd. The host sat back, her expression expectant, waiting for Clint to hesitate, to fumble, to show even a flicker of doubt. But Clint Eastwood didn't hesitate. He didn't fumble, and doubt had no place in his world. Trade up, he repeated slowly, the words rolling off his tongue like gravel. You say that like loyalty is some kind of business transaction. Like people are commodities you swap out when something newer, shinier, or more convenient comes along. His voice was low, controlled, but it carried the weight of someone who had seen more than most could imagine. But let me tell you something about value, he continued, his gaze unwavering, since that seems to be the only thing people like you understand. The host's smug expression flickered just for a moment. Clint saw it. So did the audience. In business, sure, you can trade up, find a newer model, a better deal. Something with fewer miles on it. But we're not talking about cars or contracts here. He leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the host. We're talking about loyalty, integrity, respect. He let the words settle, let the weight of them fill the room. Things the media stopped valuing a long time ago. The host shifted, clearly feeling the control of the interview slip through her fingers. I'm simply asking, she attempted, her voice not quite as sharp as before, whether your loyalty to Trump has cost you. But Clint didn't let her finish. What's really fascinating, he cut in, his voice carrying that familiar mix of patience and quiet authority, is how people like you can't seem to grasp the concept of standing by those who stand by you. He shook his head slightly, almost as if in pity. You sit here asking me if I've thought about trading up, while proving exactly why your ratings are going down. The host's face stiffened, her carefully curated composure slipping. Because you don't understand real value, Clint continued, his voice gaining momentum. You don't understand real loyalty, and you sure as hell don't understand real respect. Scattered applause broke out in the audience. The host's face flushed, her attempt to regain control slipping through her grasp. But she tried one last desperate attempt at damage control. I didn't mean to suggest, she started, her voice trembling slightly. But Clint wasn't done. Oh, but you did, he said, his voice unwavering. You meant exactly what you said. That's the problem with media today. You throw out these comments, these implications, thinking you can smear someone's name, and then you scramble to backtrack when you get called out. The host sat stiffly, her hands clasped together tightly. You wanted a conversation about loyalty? Clint asked, his voice unshakable. Fine, let's have one. He took his time, letting the moment stretch, commanding the room without ever raising his voice. Donald Trump and I, we've both spent our lives standing our ground. We don't run, we don't bend to pressure, and we sure as hell don't betray the people who've stood by us just because the press decides it's inconvenient. The entire studio was silent now. No producer in her earpiece, no teleprompter cue could save the host from what was happening. You sit here, Clint said, his voice quiet but cutting, and you ask if I should reconsider my support for Trump. But tell me something. What does it say about you that loyalty confuses you? That standing by someone you believe in seems foreign to you? The host had nothing left. Her well-rehearsed tactics, her media training. It was all useless now. Because Clint Eastwood wasn't playing her game. He was playing his own, and he had just won. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands in his lap, and let the truth hang in the air. The liberal host had thought she was setting a trap. Instead, she had walked straight into her own. Clint Eastwood didn't move. He sat there, steady as a rock, his weathered hands resting on the armrests of his chair, his piercing gaze locked on the host. The energy in the studio had changed. Everyone could feel it. The audience, the crew, even the host herself. She had thought she was in control. She had thought she was about to land a career-defining moment. She had thought wrong. These aren't things you trade up for, Clint said, his voice calm but filled with undeniable authority. These are things you treasure. The audience, once unsure how to react, had begun nodding in agreement. Some looked visibly moved. A few even wiped their eyes, feeling the weight of his words. But Clint wasn't done. He was about to deliver the knockout blow that would make this interview unforgettable. And let me tell you something else, he continued, leaning forward slightly, his voice carrying across the studio, commanding attention in a way that only someone like Clint Eastwood could. The fact that you would even ask that question shows everything that's wrong with the way the media sees relationships today. The host shifted in her seat, her confident demeanor beginning to crack. You think everything is disposable, Clint went on, his voice never rising, yet somehow growing stronger with every word. Marriages, commitments, values, you treat them all like they're just commodities, something to be bought and sold in your endless chase for controversy. He gestured toward the cameras, toward the audience, toward the entire production surrounding them. You invite people onto shows like this, pretending you want a real conversation. But you don't want a conversation. You want drama, you want scandal, you want that viral moment. He paused for a beat, then added with a slight smirk, "Well, congratulations, you just got one." The host's fake smile had vanished completely. She looked like someone who could see her career unraveling in real time. But she tried desperately to salvage what she could. "Mr. Eastwood, I think you're misinterpreting what I meant." Clint cut her off with the ease of a man who had seen this game played 1,000 times before. "No," he said firmly, his gaze unwavering. "I'm interpreting exactly what you said. And now, let me tell you what everyone at home is thinking. They're thinking about their own relationships, their own marriages, the years they've spent building something real with someone they love. And they're disgusted by your suggestion that all of that," he gestured toward the audience, his voice unwavering, "all that history, all that loyalty, all that love should just be thrown away for what? A newer model?" The audience burst into applause. The host opened her mouth to speak, but Clint raised a hand, and the room fell silent again. He wasn't finished. "You know what makes America great?" Clint asked, his voice carrying the weight of experience, of wisdom hard-earned over a lifetime. "It's not just success stories. It's values, family, loyalty, commitment. The understanding that real relationships aren't about convenience or about what looks good on a magazine cover. They're about standing by each other through thick and thin." He leaned back now, completely in command of the moment, while the host scrambled with her note cards, her fingers moving quickly in a last-ditch attempt to salvage the wreckage of her interview. But it was too late. "So, no," Clint continued, his tone unwavering. "I've never thought about trading up. Because there is no up from standing by the people who've stood by you. There's no upgrade from loyalty. There's no better deal than someone who's been your rock through every storm." The host's hands trembled slightly as she shuffled her cards, desperately trying to regain control. But control had left the room the moment Clint had decided he wasn't going to play along. "And let me tell you something else," Clint said, delivering the final blow that would turn this interview into a television legend. "The real story here isn't about me. It's not about Donald Trump." His voice took on a new edge, sharper now, as he turned his gaze directly to the host. "It's about you, about what you represent in today's media." He gestured toward the stack of note cards in her hand. "You came here with your pre-planned questions, your scripted traps, thinking you'd expose something." He continued, his voice steady, deliberate. "Instead, you exposed yourself. You showed every person watching exactly what's wrong with the media today." The host's producer was frantically signaling for a commercial break, but she sat frozen, unable to regain control of the interview. "You see," he said, his voice smooth as ever, "you thought you were going to embarrass me by implying that I should abandon loyalty for vanity. Instead, you embarrassed yourself by proving you don't understand the first thing about real relationships, about real commitment, or even real journalism." The audience had begun shifting in their seats. Some were nodding, others were standing, murmuring in agreement. The energy in the room had shifted completely. "Let me tell you what real journalism would look like," Clint continued, his voice carrying a quiet but undeniable authority. "It would ask real questions. It would talk about the issues that matter. It would focus on the things that make a difference in people's lives. But that wouldn't give you your viral moment, would it?" He shook his head slightly. "That wouldn't fit your narrative." The host swallowed hard. She had nothing left, no comeback, no quip, no way to turn the tide. Clint Eastwood had taken control, and in doing so, he had just given America one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. Clint Eastwood didn't even flinch. His steel blue eyes locked onto the host, his expression unwavering. The weight of his presence alone was enough to silence the room, but his words would deliver the final blow. "You know what really bothers people about the mainstream media?" he said, his voice low but commanding, the kind that made people lean in just to hear every word. "It's not just the bias, everyone can see that. It's the fact that you've abandoned real journalism for cheap shots and gotcha moments. You've traded substance for sensation." The host tried to interject, her voice shaky, desperate for some semblance of control. "Mr. Eastwood, we're simply trying to ask the questions our viewers—" Clint cut her off with a firm shake of his head. "No. You're trying to manufacture controversy where there is none. You're trying to suggest that a man in my position would naturally want to trade in his old friends, his loyalty, his values for something newer, something shinier, because that fits your shallow worldview." The tension in the studio was palpable. No one dared move. The audience was hanging on his every word. "But let me tell you something," Clint continued, his voice steady, his tone unmistakably resolute. "Real men, real leaders stand by their commitments. They honor their word. They understand the value of loyalty. You see, it's not about chasing the next best thing. It's about appreciating what you've built, the history, the struggles, the triumphs. That's what makes something truly valuable." The audience erupted into applause, their cheers drowning out the host's feeble attempt to regain control. She had walked into this thinking she could trap him, humiliate him, reduce him to another sensationalized headline. Instead, she had given him the platform to say something far more powerful than she ever expected. But Clint wasn't done yet. "And here's the thing about true partnerships," he went on, now speaking with the quiet certainty of a man who had seen and done it all. "They don't fade with time, they get stronger. Every challenge you face together, every storm you weather, every victory you share, it builds something real, something lasting. But that's something your brand of shallow thinking will never understand." The host, visibly rattled, attempted one last defense. "Mr. Eastwood, we were just trying to have an honest conversation about—" Clint let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Honest? You want honesty? Let's be honest. You didn't come here for a real conversation. You came here hoping to embarrass me, hoping to reduce something meaningful into a soundbite, hoping to push your own agenda. But instead, you've shown everyone watching exactly why they don't trust the media anymore." He gestured to the studio, the cameras, the audience. "Every single person watching. Look around. Every person here knows exactly what you were trying to do. And every person at home watching this knows too. They see through these tactics. They understand what real relationships, real values, and real loyalty look like." The host's face was flushed, her producer now frantically signaling for a commercial break. But Clint wasn't finished. He held up a hand, silencing any attempt to cut him off. "No," he said, his voice firm. "We're going to finish this." The studio fell into absolute silence. Even the camera operators leaned forward slightly, knowing they were capturing something that would be replayed for years to come. "The reason your question about trading up bothers people so much," Clint continued, his voice now carrying a raw emotional weight, "isn't just because it's disrespectful to me or to Donald Trump or to anyone you try to smear with your nonsense. It's because it's disrespectful to every couple who has stood by each other for decades, to every marriage that has faced hardship and made it through, to every relationship that's built on something deeper than what's in the headlines of a gossip column." He turned to the camera now, addressing the millions watching at home. There are folks sitting at home right now, married 20, 30, 40 years, who've built lives together, raised families, seen good times and bad. And you sit there, suggesting that all of that should be tossed aside for something younger, something new and improved. The host attempted to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper now. She had lost. Clint pressed on. "This isn't just about defending my values. It's about defending every person who believes in real love, real commitment, and real integrity. Because that's what makes America great, not the shallow, fleeting distractions you push on television, but the deep, lasting bonds that hold families and communities together. The audience erupted into applause, this time standing, their cheers echoing through the studio. The host's producer had given up trying to salvage the situation, knowing this moment would live forever in television history. Clint Eastwood leaned back in his chair, his final words hanging in the air like the last scene of a classic Western. "Let me leave you with this thought," he said, his voice strong and unwavering. "To every person watching who has stood by their spouse, their friends, their family, who has chosen loyalty over convenience, honor over easy exits, remember this. That's what real strength looks like. And no matter how much the media tries to twist it, no one can take that away from you." With that, Clint Eastwood sat back, calm as ever. The host sat frozen, defeated, her cards useless in her hands. She had tried to trap him, but instead, he had given the country a moment they would never forget. Clint Eastwood leaned back in his chair, his expression calm yet unwavering. His voice, though steady, carried a weight that filled the entire studio. "To the folks at home," he said, his tone resolute, "the ones who've built real lives with real partners, you're the backbone of this country, not the media elites with their twisted narratives, not the Hollywood crowd with their disposable values. You, who honor commitment, who stand by your word, you're the ones who truly make America great. Right now, America isn't just watching me stand my ground. They're watching you reveal exactly what's wrong with the media today." The audience erupted into thunderous applause, rising to their feet. The host producer finally managed to cut to a commercial break, but the damage was done. Within hours, the interview would go viral, solidifying this as a defining moment in television history. In today's America, where the media often prioritizes sensationalism over substance, Clint Eastwood's response in this interview serves as a powerful lesson in integrity, loyalty, and standing up for what truly matters. The host attempted to trap him with a shallow narrative, assuming that power and status should naturally lead to abandoning long-term commitments. But Clint's unwavering defense of his values, his belief in loyalty, respect, and commitment, resonates deeply in a society where traditional values often feel under attack. The lesson here is clear. True strength isn't about chasing the next best thing. It's about valuing what you've built, whether in marriage, career, or friendships. Success isn't about trading up, but about standing firm, honoring commitments, and weathering storms together. In an era where instant gratification is glorified, this story reminds us that real success comes from perseverance, loyalty, and staying true to the people and principles that define us. What did you think of this powerful exchange? Did Clint Eastwood's words resonate with you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate integrity, loyalty, and the power of standing strong. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video with another unforgettable moment.